Welcome back to our study in the book of Colossians. We're in chapter 3. We're in a very exciting part where Paul gets very detailed about how we should live and what our language, what our communication, what our actions should be like. We're going to pick up and go back and read verse 5 so that we can kind of get back into the feel of it. And then we're going to just kind of stop and look at phrases, as opposed to what I typically do is read the scripture and then break it down. We're going to kind of break it down as we go through it and read it together, and that's important. And as we do that, we'll get a better understanding as it progresses with us. So, Colossians 3, verse 5. Therefore, treat the parts of your earthly body as dead to sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and greed, which amounts to idolatry. He's talking about the things of the flesh that put things between us and God. And we worship those things more than we do God. Or sometimes just we worship those things. And when we say worship, we must understand that's not a bowing down and singing songs to. That's putting worth to them more than God. In other words, they're worth more to us than they are to God. Or than God is to us, excuse me. So, let's keep going. Verse 6. For it is because of these things, what he just described there, that the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience. These are the people that continue to practice things like sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, greed, those things. We see that in our world, in our culture very much today, where people are only after the money. I ministered a sermon the other day about how God can heal us regardless of what we do or don't do, if we will trust him, if we will place ourselves in his hands. And he can use the medical people, but he doesn't have to, because he created us, he can heal us perfectly well. And in that, the bottom line was, I talked to a few people later, and they were talking about how there were Christians in the medical industry, and there are, and that's great, that's wonderful. We need them there. But the bottom line is the medical industry is about money and greed, just like the mainstream media is about money and greed, just like the government is about money and greed. They may be Christian people in there, and that's good. We need them there. But that's not what the industries are about. And so these different things in the world, God is going to punish. And it says very clearly, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience. Who are the sons of disobedience? Well, they're not the sons of God through adoption. They are the sons of the devil. And we have to be honest about that. And we don't like to hear that kind of language because we don't want to offend people. But we have to understand who it is. And the four major institutions of the world are all tainted that way. The government, the mainstream media, medical, and education. Those are all tainted that way. Again, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There are important people there who are Christians, and they do make a difference. But the bottom line of these institutions and what they make up as the sons of disobedience, the ways of the world, the institutions of the world, they are full of greed. And we see that very clearly in our culture today. And God is going to pour his wrath out on them, and we can see the beginnings of that right now. Let's go on and read verse 7. And in them you also once walked. He's saying, you remember, you were like that too. So don't get too arrogant here. He says, you once walked when you were living in them. Verse 8. But now you also rid yourselves of all of them: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene speech from your mouth. I think one of the most weird things I see going on in America around us today is the language that's being used. I'm not necessarily referring to profanity, but how people lash out against one another. And they slander each other. And they have a lot of malice in their voices. And even profanity too, but they're willing to really try to fight over their own toys with bad language, bad motivated speech that does nothing but destroy and hurt themselves, not the ones that they are aiming it at for the most part. This comes very, very clearly in our culture. And as we see it, we can also understand that God will punish it, but he also calls us to be different, to live our lives, because we have rid ourselves of those things. And so what we must do is shine for Christ, and we must be a reflection of Jesus as we live in the world we live in today, just as that first century church in Colossae was too. We'll pick up there the next time.